Welcome to the CTO Club podcast. I'm your host, Sam Baker, and today we're joined by three CTOs from the Cloud Native world: Itiel Shwartz from Komodor, Giulio Roggero from Maya Platform, and Johnsen from Rig.dev. And today we'll be delving into how companies can maximize the return of investment on platform engineering initiatives, with the guys sharing their insights, experiences, and strategies around this. So thanks for joining, guys. Let's dive in. So, Giulio, I'm going to let you kick us off with this. So what are your thoughts and approaches to maximizing ROI with regards to your platform engineering initiatives?
Hi, Sam. It's great to be here. Thank you for the question. Okay, maximize the ROI is not so easy because you have to measure it. And to measure the ROI is a complex matter because usually platform engineering is an IT for IT, usually. Is an IT for IT approach initiative. And then if you introduce a new way to build your application, but you are not able to measure the benefit of introducing new technologies, a new way to work for the end users, it's not so easy to say you have an ROI. In my idea, you have to slice your company and try to create a small MVP introducing a step-by-step platform engineering approach and try to measure the time to market reduction, the quality improvements, the cost reduction for a small project, for a small initiative that's going production very fast. It's a quick win approach. I don't know, you introduce platform engineering in 1 month, you want to implement with platform engineering approach a new application, you try out to implement that application, you measure the time to market, the cost, and the quality of the application.
Awesome. And Itiel, I'll bring you in secondly. Is there anything you do slightly differently, or do you have a similar approach? What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's like Giulio said, it's like a very hard thing to measure or to determine. I think because it can be very costly both to try to estimate how much is it going to cost you, right? Like the ROI is basically return on an investment. And knowing the investment is quite hard and knowing the revenue is quite hard. So ROI for platform engineering or in general for ops is really, really difficult. I think it's a question of setting some far-fetched goal. For example, if my CI would take instead of 1 hour, 1 minute, what will the organization gain? You don't need to measure anything other than what's the current status and some dream that you have. And I think once you found 1 or 2 or 3 points that are important to you, you should strive and do them. But usually for platform engineering, I will suggest focusing on very small amount of WIP a work in progress. And you should make sure that the ones that you are working on are going to change the scales at some point. So it's less around the frequent measuring because it's very hard, the determining what is the investment part. It's more after this project, will I see significant improvement? And if so, we should probably do that. But it's a lot of hunch. In the end of the day, I can say a lot of things, but I think a lot of the times platform engineers is slightly ask the customers and slightly that's what I feel, that's what I think.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then finally, Anders, obviously you're coming at this from a slightly earlier stage in your company's progress. Do you approach things any differently, or are you of the same kind of mindset?
No, I share a lot of these thoughts, absolutely. We have a sort of slightly different approach to what I've been doing before. We've been doing a bunch of interviews of companies and platform engineering teams as a way to sort of evolve the product, really trying to hear from people what they're doing. So we sort of pick up a little bit of sort of missed opportunities and how people do things. And I can completely see this pattern of how do you measure productivity in a development team. As it's a struggle, it's a hard thing to do and hard to quantize it. And something I feel that is also missing is talking about how do you measure DevOps improvement, because platform engineering it's about improving developer productivity, of course, but it's also about improving DevOps productivity. How do you maintain your infrastructure without having to migrate through all your microservices, through all your developers? Like, how do you do that? So there's something around measuring duration of migrations, a number of migrations that is more than a single line of change. I think that is a topic that is not seen a lot when you talk about platform engineering in terms of return of investment. And then, of course, there's all the risk involved that is sort of the maybe the negative side of this, talking about the upkeep. Whenever you do an investment, right, what is the maintenance cost over time? That's something that is easy to forget. Think about what is something you can do now, what is something that you can pick up and solve now, but what is sort of the hidden cost in having to maintain this, to maintain the documentation going forward. That's at least some of the trends I've seen out there.
Awesome. And Giulio, I know you said it's kind of difficult to measure in certain instances the return on investment. Are there any specific kind of KPIs or metrics that you would work towards within that to see the return of investment that you're producing?
Yes, good question. I think that we start to understand that the software remaining in the company is an asset. People are changing in the company. Then you build up software, but after a while you will change the company, and that software will remain for other people. And this is a cost, because you need to help people to onboarding to the new to the current application, and to improve that application at a different level of the life cycle of that application. Just some example, and that we can use as a metric. Starting a new application from scratch. How much does it take without a platform engineering service approach? Onboarding a new team member on an existing application is another point. Is a good point, because when you start, you hire a new member in your team. You have to provide to her or to him a documentation about the product, how to code on that, and so on and so forth. A lot of time you can spend to improve, to set up your machine, your developer environment. If you have a way to go and just click and start to code, is a dramatic improvement. Another part is you have a problem in production, and you during the night, and you don't remember where is the dashboard, where is the log, which is the problem. If you are able to provide a way to speed up the troubleshooting of an incident and to solve that incident in production, is a good starting point to measure the value of the business for your platform engineering approach. I have other, but I prefer to give also other. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. And Itiel, in terms of your team, do you have any specific KPIs or metrics that you use, or is it similar to Giulio's?
There are the DORA metrics. I can say that we keep track on all of them, but for us it's very important the question of how much time does it take commit to production, right? Like, this is one KPI. The second is failure rate in that area, commit to production. And I will also say that internally, one of the things that are very important for us is retries, or partially failing jobs or tasks. So how can we make sure that when we see something, if it's an alert, if it's a CI that failed, we know that that's the real thing. So reducing the noise. We have a KPI on retries that happen and work, which means that the mechanic itself is broken. And other than that, there are I would say those are the main ones. Other things are harder to measure, or you don't really trust a lot of the things. So we try to keep it quite lean.
Nice. And then Anders, same question to you. Do you have a different approach, or is it a similar one?
Slightly different in that our product is about sort of trying to solve these things. So we don't measure a lot right now. We more focus on I think there was a really good point before, how quickly can you start a new service as an action point, and it's 2 clicks, right? That is a way for us to sort of improve that, and having a way of both introducing concepts and introducing new components easily, right? So it's less about the measurement of it, more about the actions and how you can sort of simplify that.
Awesome. And then Giulio, moving forward then. So if you were starting a new platform engineering initiative, how would you navigate the trade-offs between like the short-term cost implications and then like the long-term benefits when you're actually evaluating your investments?
Okay, it's like an agile initiative. When you start, you approach agile, an incremental approach of creating an application. You try to speed up the business creation, providing in production, deploying in production a small slice of your application, and try to measure the value of that application in production, even if there is few features than the full application. And with the similar approach, I suggest to go in production very fast with a small feature, just the core one, and you want to validate and try out to balance in that way the cost of the implementation of the platform engineering initiative and the benefit. Just choose one feature that you want to validate and try it out. And then if you take benefit from that, you can do an internal marketing inside your company to fund your initiative. Otherwise, you become just 1 year of cost without a benefit, because the most important part of platform engineering initiative is not the technology, is not the product, but are the people. Because you are changing your mind. The approach becomes that DevOps, IT Ops guys are creating a tool for developers. And also developers are creating tools for developers itself, because they can provide them to in the marketplace existing components, reuse components, and so on. For them, it's becoming a marketplace inside your company of reusage for usage infrastructure, pipeline, DevOps tools, API gateways, and applications, and so on and so forth. And it's important to have a quick win solution and start to do an internal marketing approach to spread across all the teams the adoption of the project. Otherwise, it's just become just a tool that is installed and is maintained, but without any value.
Cool. And then Anders, I'll come to you next. In terms of your situations, obviously your company's had this process relatively recently with planning for an engineering initiative that you would probably have had to weigh up the cost in the short term to see the long-term benefit. How did you guys approach that kind of initial planning stage, and what's your kind of next steps, I guess?
Can I, before we dive into that, can I just comment to the other one, because I think that the other question was really relevant. I completely share that. That there's some thoughts about starting up with a platform engineering team, at least from sort of our interviews with companies and how they got to different situations. There's a few patterns we've seen that I think are interesting. That there's this, for most companies, right, there is something that makes you stand out. That is something you do that is unique, that is your secret sauce, that is what makes your company interesting. And there's a trade-off about reflecting that all the way from the product, the development team, all the way to DevOps. So DevOps specialize in doing great for that. So if you're a company that rely on machine learning, that is where you invest the resources in allowing yourself to doing something custom, building tooling that can empower that and have you stand out, and then leverage existing tooling for the stuff that is possible to put into pattern, using managed components where it's possible to sort of balance where you want to put your resources, right? So you don't end up with a platform team that is too occupied with things that are kind of already solved, already available, and by doing that, not getting the right attention to where you can really make a difference for the company. I think that's an interesting thing I've seen a couple of times. And then there's the sort of exposure to what you're doing, and this goes two ways. It's of a key person exposure, and it's also a tool exposure that you are potentially vulnerable, because it is these very unique teams you build up with some few stakeholders that has a big architectural understanding of what you have as a platform at a company, right? And I think that there's a balance in ensuring that you don't have too much knowledge in too few people, because you become very reliant on, we become vulnerable as a company. I think that's something to keep in mind. And the same goes for when you pick a new tool. Like, is this a tool that we can get out of again? Like, are we reliant on it? What is our getting into it strategy? I mean, using tooling can be great because you can get up quickly, get a lot of benefit quickly. But migrating out of a tool can also be a pain if there's no good, well-defined exit strategy. At least I think that's sort of adds a little bit to that discussion.
Awesome, thank you for that. And then, Itiel, I'm going to segue a little bit in terms of the next question. If you were to be giving advice to a company maybe starting down a platform engineering path, what advice would you give them to justify and maximize the ROI of their investments within platform engineering?
Yeah, I think it's again like the question of ROI. So, and like maybe also to connect it to your last question, it's a question of like short-term goals and like long-term goals. And usually it works best by taking a small part of the organization and like using him as a guinea pigs, right? Like making sure that one team is self-sufficient, empowered, and so on. So I would suggest, first of all, to have this like grand plan, right? Like we want all of the developers in the organization to troubleshoot Kubernetes alone, to spin up their services, to use Argo, whatever you want. Then there's like the question of how fast can one of my customers, meaning developers, can see value from this platform. And I think I will try and strive to have something very ambitious as the goal of the relevant team. But on the other hand, I have something very concrete regarding what are the first things that I'm going to do that is going to give direct impact to something in the organization. You don't need obviously all of them, but for something. So I think it's a question of those two. Like in the end of the day, moving the company like culture and technology stack is something that will take years, right? Like it's not like in a couple of months, and you need some sort of way to make sure that you still have like fuel left in you. So you need to give like some small candies along the way, and to make sure that people are on your side every step of the way. Like in a good organization, after like 6 months, I will say, I would expect to see people from the developers themselves, from other like parts of the organization, wanting to get like a buy-in of the platform team. And you can only achieve that if you're giving real value to your end users.
Cool. And Giulio, is there anything that you would add to that from an advice perspective?
Yeah, I just would like to understand what does it mean platform engineering for an organization, because this is the starting point. Sometimes organizations are thinking about platform in not just for infrastructure but also for DevOps. Other companies are looking for platform for data, for API, and who are the end user of that product as a platform? You have an internal platform that can be, we can say, platform engineering is DevOps plus infrastructure, plus data, plus API, composability. We can say like C, platform engineering plus plus. I don't know. This can be another way to see that. And if your main objective is to keep your developer happy, because you provide a tool, an internal tool for self-service usage from the platform engineering side, maybe you lose some part of the benefit, because you know that the developers are opinionated and they want something that simplify their life, but this doesn't mean that this simplify also the business or improve the business of the company. And this is a critical part. Then when we start with a new customer that asks us to help them there to go in with the platform engineering initiative, we say, let's just check the status at the moment, just do an assessment of the for today, and what do you want to reach tomorrow, but not just at the level of developers, but at the level of your business, which is your objective in the business part.
Anders, you got anything?
Yeah, I have a question. I know it's just a very interesting topic. So, what are your thoughts on how opinionated a platform team should be in guiding the sort of internal customer in navigating that and making a decision?
Yeah, I will say it depends on the organization and culture. Like, I think in some cultures, the developer themselves are really like, they want to have it, they want to have the tools. And then I think I will try to push as much responsibility for the dev team. If the dev team doesn't want any kind of ownership, then I think it should be like probably the VP R&D, but in some cases, maybe like the VP, the platform engineering, to push the developers. Like, you don't necessarily need to listen to them all of the time, but you do need to get a buy-in from someone in that team that is like higher level if you don't have that buy-in. So I think it depends on the company culture and how much do you want to take the current company culture and just improve it, or do you want to really change how things are going? Really depends per company.
So basically a balance between sort of organization leads, developers, and the platform tooling, and sort of trying to navigate it.
Yeah, but a good question.
Good question. And Anders, obviously, as I said, you guys have been going through this process for the last few years now. What advice would you give to a team who's just starting out?
I'm going to be extremely opinionated on this based on what we're doing, but I think it's important that, especially if you're starting off, that you are having to consider if you're reinventing the wheel. There's a huge community today. There's a bunch of tooling and companies doing a lot of cool tooling in this space, and I think it's important that you both try to navigate that. That could be a sort of big task to do. Like, there's a lot of things going on, but trying to understand where things moving, what can I get far with a minimal effort versus having to invent myself, because there are a lot of reinventing the wheel out there, and that is sort of my developer heart is having a hard time with that. I'm used to, when I want to solve a problem, I go and find a library that does it for me. If I want to send an email, I find an SMTP client and I use that, send an email, and everything is good, right? I don't start with writing one myself, and I like to see that discipline being adopted more in how you approach this area. But again, this also depends on, like, individually how people are approaching it. But I think that would be my advice.
Cool, thank you very much. And then, just as we move towards the end, I was keen to get a bit of a summary from the three of you, and maybe if you could all provide me with one kind of key point to summarize how you would maximize the ROI of platform engineering. Julio, if I start with you, if that's all right.
Yeah, stop meeting, start starting, start finishing. This sentence, you are okay. You can say also platform engineering help you to stop a meeting and start coding. Because I think in the same way, if you can, this is the way to measure. Because if you reduce the meeting with other people, call, because everything is self-service, is clear, is in the tool is much more fast for everybody. You can focus then. Stop meeting, start coding is a good starting point for measure the ROI. Yes.
Like it. That's a good point. So no meetings, just code. Like it. Itiel, I'll come to you next. What's your point?
A hard question. Have something measurable or like objective for the first step. I think that's the most important thing. Something that you know that if you reach that, then you are happy, and if you didn't reach that, then you are sad. I think like that's like the hardest thing to configure freehand and then to follow through. So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. And then finally, Anders.
Yeah, thank you. For this meeting, I tried to prepare a few sort of metrics. What would I make up of metrics if I wanted to sort of start off a platform engineering team? And that was difficult to do, to actually convert it into something measurable. And being this discussion, I appreciate that. I get the sense that we all kind of struggle in coming with something measurable, saying this is the thing. But I still think it's important. If you want to measure the change, you have to find it. But maybe it's a about finding like that one thing you want to solve first, right? Trying to sort of find all of them is very difficult, and you will never get anywhere. Find the one thing you want to measure, you want to change, and then approach it like that, and make it as concrete as possible.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me today on the podcast, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.